Alright, Gamer Bears, it is time for a new episode of Unused Content in Games, and today you see right over here, we're continuing the Mega Man X series, continuing with Mega Man X3's Unused Content. Starting off here with the prototype information, as well as this August prototype build right over here. So let's begin, but before we truly begin, if you like this video at any point in time, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and commenting to the channel. So free, you can always change your mind later on as well, so you don't miss out on any more unused content in games like this, if you choose to subscribe, that is. Anyways, let us continue with Mega Man X3 SNES August prototype. A Japanese prototype of Mega Man X3 was found by one C. Davis, rendered and fixed up by the good people at Arduino CC, I guess, and released by Rockman Corners on November 11th, 2016. A second earlier prototype was released over a year later on July 5th, 2018. And just skipping the rest of that blurb, let's start with the game start. Not a lot of changes from the final game, but some things of note. I like the boot up over here. The CX4 chip test screen seems to have been disabled, as holding B lets the game boot normally. Although the music will be muted until the game is started. In the final game, holding B after the CX4 chip test still mutes the music, but only until the gameplay demo has run. There are also no copyright screens here, it instead goes directly into the Capcom logo. The city in the background is colored and arranged differently, and the tower also sits a little lower on the August prototype. The clouds at the top of the left and rightmost buildings were moved up in the final to accommodate this, as well as having their formation slightly adjusted. In addition, there are two spotlights instead of one, but both are completely non-moving, opaque, and extend from the towers rather than the red building onto the right, or to the right. Though not really noticeable, the background is also 2 pixels shorter than the final versions. Alright, here's a closer look at this. And here's what the final game looks like. Alright, Mao the Giant Giant's animations freeze with his arms bare in the August prototype, instead of covering with electrical current graphics as in the final. The black box containing the text is also larger in the August build. Here's a closer look at this. Mao the Giant being the intro boss to X3 for those who might be a little confused. Alright, unsurprisingly, the skyline is also slightly darker. The spy copters and lasers are much faster in the August version. There are no speed variances despite the difference in perspective. There are periods missing on all lines notated or narrated statements, aside from the line before the spy copters attacks and the closing line of the intro. However, any other punctuations, ellipses, exclamation marks, commas are there. So here's a closer look at this. And the final game. Alright, title screen and demo gameplay. The beginning of the title screen music is 3 times as long, repeating as a rising melody before it kicks into the main part of the song. Appropriately enough, the wireframe X takes a little longer to dock on the logo. It's also worth noting that the music cuts off just a little bit earlier than it should before the demo runs, and here is what that sounds like. Let's just play a little bit of that, and the final version. Don't want to play too much just in case of copyright strike. The only visible difference between the August prototype title screens and the release version is a simple bit of text identifying the sample's build date. There are also no sounds on the menu aside from X firing, just as in X2. The password option is not selectable in the August 23rd prototype, as the X icon can only move to start game and game and option mode. The gameplay demo seems to break under unknown circumstances. This will sometimes cause X to not climb down the first ladder or occasionally get destroyed by a note or banger. This happens on very rare occasions in the final game, but happens very frequently in this version. In another scenario, the gameplay demo completely breaks attempting to start not from the front door, of the Maverick Hunter's HQ, but from the Spy Copter's cutscene, causing glitched graphics and placing X in the far left of the screen. The demo ends shortly after X lands, and here's a closer look at the title screen from the August 9th build. Here's the August 23rd build. And finally, the final Japanese version of the game. Alright, password screen. The password mode is disabled in the August 23rd prototype, but can still be accessed by forcing the cursor onto the options via Pro Action Replay with this code over here. While the password screen is fully functional, no passwords from the final version are accepted. However, all passwords from X2 will work and give X the appropriate items, including a non-functional version of the item tracer weapon. Presumably the 0-part modifier is instead keep tracks of whether bit, byte, or vial have been defeated. In all versions, using an invalid password on the password screen displays a picture of Dr. Doppler, while a valid password displays a picture of 0. In the August version, however, both images use the same incorrect palettes and are cropped to the same size as the password error/confirmed graphics in X2, 32 by 24 pixels, rather than the final version's 32 by 32 pixel graphics. Here's a closer look at this. It's inverted, that's how you know what's bad, that's how you know you got the password wrong. Here's what it looks like in the final version for Dr. Doppler's face. Or as I like to call him, Dr. Dottler, after the Pokemon, but whatever. And here's Zero Space in the final version. Alright, the intro stage. The level graphics. Here's the August build, and here's the final game. Honestly, I kind of like the August build more over here. You got the little spotlights going on, and the sky's a little more purple instead of this dark, like, plum color, I guess? I don't know. And like in the intro cutscenes, the background uses a different palette, and the spotlights are baked in graphics. Alright, here's what that looks like. And here's the final game. Alright, layouts. Alright, we have the August build and this final version. In the final version, there are 2 windows instead of 3, and they're both wider and broken. The 2 small energy palettes were removed since X will always be at full HP after the Mac boss fight. Here's what this looks like. Maybe they thought it looked a little cleaner to get rid of the 3 windows? I don't know. I think I prefer the 3 windows, though. Getting rid of those energy palettes don't make sense why they did that. Miscellaneous. 0 doesn't have a sound effect when you teleports away at the beginning. If you use debug commands to bring all Maverick weapons into the intro stage, the head gunner customer will be changed to head gunner Mass Pro, just like in the main games. After beating the intro stage with all Maverick weapons, the game will automatically load the Dr. Kane cutscene as if you had beaten all Maverick bosses. Max Energy Ball doesn't have a sound effect when it hits X. Zero's theme doesn't play anywhere in the August sample, likely hasn't been put in there yet. The screen doesn't lock on the left side after the player gets control of Zero, so they can go all the way back to the start of the stage if they want. And after reaching Max Boss Door, backtracking to collect the health pickups at the bottom of the vertical section will cause the game to softlock, and a weird PAL to be applied to the spike ball on screen. This does not occur when collecting the pickups at full health, nor when collecting it before reaching Max Boss Room, or Boss Door. This occurs in both August prototypes and was fixed in the final version, because it would have looked awful if they didn't. It does happen a lot during game development when you get little glitches like this. Just gotta learn to smooth on them out. X's hanger capture poses is different in the final version. Alright, here's what that looks like in the prototype, where he kind of looks like he's just floating in the air, I guess. In the final version, he looks like he's in a bit more pain, yet he's still floating in the air. Maybe because this little thing over here has some sort of magnetic polarity keeping him in the air, but whatever. Our max large energy ball stun Zero for a few seconds in the final version. It just damages him a bit. Alright, the Hangirder carrying excess 32 HP in the August prototype, with a Z Buster Shot doing 3 HP of damage. And a half charge shot doing 5 HP, and charge shot doing 9 HP. In the final version, it only has 5 HP, so it'll go down in 2-0 buster shots, or 1/2 charge shot / charge shot. And during the fight with Mao the Giant in the August prototypes, X can move back to the entrance shutter, allowing the boss to be defeated from a distance. In the final version, the screen is locked from scrolling back to the entrance. In the August prototypes, the spike ball on the end of Mao's arms never deflect X's shots. In the final version, the spike balls will deflect X's shots once Mao extends his arm. After defeating Mao in the August 9th build, you can briefly see the background graphics moving in place. This was fixed in the August 23rd version. In the August 9th build, if you defeat Mao by using the Z-Saber shockwave activated through the debug command, the game will freeze in place. If the blade deals the last blow before shockwaves comes out, Mao will be defeated normally. The blade deals 30 damage to Mao. Alright, charged spinning blades also deals fatal damage to Mao, the same damage as Z-Saber's blade parts. Uncharged parasitic bombs freeze the game when it hits Mao. And here's a closer look at the Mac boss fight with X's original pose. Alright, and in the August 9th build, if the player inputs the 2PB button plus 2P up, checkpoint warp debug commands to proceed to one checkpoint beyond Mao. The pre-Doppler stage Dr. Kane cutscene will play, though the background graphics are corrupted. Entering the warp command once more will take the player to what appears to be the beginning development of the casserole cutscene. A room which includes a road, the city background, and X in midair, continually running in place. And here's what that looks like. Alright, with that being said, that's this part of unused content. Next up, the 8 Mavericks. The bulk of the game's changes. Alright, this won't be as long as the X2 collection of videos, but it'll still be decently long, I think. Alright, Blast Hornet, or Explose Hornek. Gee, I didn't know he had a neck. Anyways, mini-map. There's an extra block to the left of the right armor platform in the earlier mini-map. This is just taken up by a solid 256 by 256 box in both versions. And since it's not something the player can actually access, it was removed from the final game's minimap. Here's a closer look. Level graphics. A few changes on the default wall block, all of them on the left side. This hopefully keeps the player from noticing that the blocks are used throughout the stage. And here's a closer look at this. The helicopter inside the base was redrawn and a simple fading cycling palette was changed to a slightly more complicated blue to orange cycle, and here's what that looks like. This ship kind of looks like, or this helicopter kind of looks like a flyer or whatever. And here's what it looks like in the final. Gravity Beetle's cargo ship doesn't have a Dr. Doppler logo on the August prototype, and the logo's palettes made the yellow lights in the ship red. Here's what that looks like. Likely they just didn't put the logo there yet. Here's is with the logo. The floor to the right of the elevator shaft is raised in the earlier prototype, but is flat in the final version. The raised floor is where the camera locks in both versions. So this might have been done to make sure that X doesn't get stuck on the floor when the screen locks. But there doesn't seem to be a way to do this in any version of the game. Here's a closer look at it. Here's the final version. An extra platform was placed before the pink light capsule. Here's a closer look. In both versions, the player is expected to use the Hawk Ride armor to get this capsule. However, in the August 9th prototype, the player can also walk up to the capsule in the ride armor, something that the game doesn't know how to handle. Once the light capsule opens, X will be flung to the right side while still technically in the right armor. At this point, he'll either fall through the floor or eventually get the enhancement chip. After getting the chip, X will be able to fire his weapon while still inside the right armor. Exiting the right armor will fix this glitch. And here's a closer look at it. You're likely not meant to take the right armor there in the first place. That's probably why they put that platform there. That you'll see in later builds. This little platform over here is what I was talking about. Not gonna lie, this could be a different version of the armor that would be kind of impractical, but whatever. Alright, the floor underneath the final conveyor belt in the first section extends enough to the left to let the player just drop off the belt and land safely below. In the final game, that floor is now horizontally level with the conveyor belt, so the player will fall into the pit if they are not paying attention. Like maybe they fall asleep or something. I don't know why they fell asleep. I mean, then again, I've tried playing games before while on very little sleep, so it can happen. Remember doing that playing Mega Man in base once, actually, back in elementary school, but whatever. Discussion for another day. There are two more raised question mark platforms sections on either side of the right armor room entrance in the August prototype. Here's a closer look. The floor under the lift platform that leads out of the right armor secret room was removed in the final version. Here's a closer look. This was done to fix the glitch where X can trigger the right armor and then quickly dash to the right, leaving the right armor on the floor and then respawn the lift platform. It will push the right armor into the left wall or the floor on the right. X can then get back into the right armor, where he'll end up getting stuck in the floor a while. If he's in the wall and jumps, he'll be pushed through the floor and die. Here's a closer look at that. For X, he did not deserve that. There's a vertical boss shutter on the top right of the Blast Hornet's boss room. There is a placeholder vertical door object above that door in the final versions, but it doesn't seem like X would use it. Rather, the door would open automatically as part of Blast Hornet's boss intro. This is probably why he pauses a bit before he drops down. Doesn't seem like that was ever programmed, though, so the final version just erases the boss door and makes the ceiling horizontally symmetrical. Excuse me. Oh, and the netting on the foreground is more torn up in the final version, as you can see here. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, this little buster over here. Tried to give him his own little intro, but it was a little buggy, so I guess they changed it. Heck, get it, Buggy, because he's a Hornet? Okay. Miscellaneous. The Shuriken, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that. Sub-boss went through a number of changes. It has 32 HP in the August build and 18 HP in the final version. In the August prototype, Shuriken uses a variation of standard enemy damage tables. In the final version, it uses Tunnel Rhino's damage tables. Most likely an easier way to code it, that's probably why they did that. Alright, and here's all the different damage values from the different weapons. Not as colorful as the ones for X2, but oh well. In the earlier versions, it's only invincible for 8 frames after taking damage. In the final version, it lasts for a full 60 frames. And assuming the game's only at 30 frames a second, that's 2 seconds. And the prototype Shuriken only rolls up the wall, and will keep doing so until it's destroyed. In the final game, it will either roll up the walls, roll back and forth, or bounce around the room. It also pauses a bit before switching patterns. The Z-Saber shockwaves, which should immobilize enemies in the August prototype, will make prototype Shuriken invincible instead. Next up, Blizzard Buffalo or Frozen Buffalo. Alright, no layout changes in the minimap, but this is nice that the early minimap properly marks both sections of Blizzard Buffalo's boss area. And here's what that looks like. Level graphics. The August prototype Blizzard's foreground layer is simpler than the ones used in the final version, made up of fewer frames, and has a simpler snowfall animation. The final version is definitely an improvement, especially with those stationary white pixels gone. Yeah, that doesn't look the best. The August 9th version of the Blizzard graphics is animated at half speed, though the actual Blizzard layer moves twice the speed of other versions. Honestly, this looks more like rain than snow, but here's a closer look. Kinda glad they changed that. Or you could say it's frozen rain, even. That's the thing. Alright, the wind that the Blizzard machine spews out is different in the prototypes. It looks like it should come out as a continuous stream of wind, like the whirlpools in Launch Octopus Stage in X1. But in all versions, the wind comes out about once every 7 frames. With the Blizzard layer, it almost works, but in the end they decided to redo the sprites anyways. So I guess they reused some graphics from X1 for that. Makes sense. And probably retextured it. Saves a bit of development time when they do stuff like that. And on assets, too. Alright, here's some stage layouts. There are more man-made structures in the foreground of the first part of the underground section of this level. There is also an additional layer of ice before the Bit and Byte shutter, which leads to an interesting glitch in both August prototypes. Here's a closer look. Alright, if the player has X dash towards the shutter and switch to 0 right before X is about to hit them, there will be just enough momentum to make 0 hit the shutter before the game tries to switch back to X. When this happens, the 0 I'll handle this sequence will play with static in place of X's picture, and the player will maintain control of 0 for the rest of the stage. 0 can even fight Bit and Byte and Blizzard Buffalo. Why did they take that in the final version? I don't know. Should have allowed him to fight bosses. Closer look at those. Alright. The same foreground changes seen in the underground section entrance can be seen in the exit. Here's a closer look at that. Alright, in the August 9th build, switching characters during the Blizzard section will make the snowfall layer start moving vertically, looping around the screen. This was fixed by the August 23rd prototype. Here's a closer look at that. With the raindrops, even though they're not properly layered since you don't see them coming from up here. Alright, the ice fragments that should appear when Blizzard Buffalo's ice bullet breaks are glitched in the August 23rd prototype only. The graphics for those fragments are in Blizzard Buffalo's tileset. It's just that it offsets the game used for them seem to be incorrect. They work properly in the August 9th build. In the final version, Blizzard Buffalo will move back a bit to fire ice bullets at X if he continuously clings to one wall. This isn't coded in either of the August prototypes, so he'll try to ram into the wall again, or shoot ice bullets into the wall. They'll immediately break. This extra check seems to have introduced a new exploit in the fall version. If X jumps over Blizzard Buffalo after he rams into the wall, and then jumps right after Blizzard Buffalo turns around to attack, he'll charge back into the wall again. This is not present in the prototype. Alright, why don't we take a look at that right over here. Blizzard Buffalo, you feeling alright there? You're just doing the same thing over and over again. Alright, you guys get the point. Next up, Gravity Beetle or Gravity Beat Bood. Whatever. No minimap layer change here. Here's what this looks like. Our level graphics. The background is obviously a few blocks repeated over and over in the earlier versions. The final version The background fixes this by adding more lights, missiles, and create tiles, as well as arranging them in a more interesting way. Here's what that looks like. Kind of looks like one of those little apartment complexes, just at nighttime or something with some weird red-looking lights. And this one looks more like one of those old warehouse shutters. There's an extra wall cancer on the left wall before the bin bite room. Here's what that looks like. I can't believe they're called wall cancers. Most likely named after, like, the Tropic of Cancer or something, but other than that, which happens to be a crab. But still. Alright, the background of the bin bite room was redone to add an opening to the foreground. The flying platform section of the stage uses the same foreground tiles as the rest of the stage in the August prototypes. In the final version, there are new purple and brown foreground tiles, seemingly copied from the new background in the first part of the stage that only appear here. Here's what that looks like. Here's the final version. The platform before the special light capsule is higher in the final version. The Hawk ride armor can just barely get to the top of the August prototypes, of it in the August prototype. Please see the blast horn section for a refresher on why this is a bad idea, because of that big old glitch. But anyways, here we go. And the final version. The more foreground tiles changes. The tiles seen in the final version are in the Gravity Beetle stage area, or boss area, in both versions. But they're used again here in the space of the area. The new openings in the foreground allow another opportunity to reuse the orange cloud background seen earlier in the stage, and here's what that looks like. Gravity Beetle's giant gravity whale / black hole attack will not always be spawned at the center of the screen, and it can also completely overlap the top of the walls, which makes the fight harder. Alright, next up, Toxic Seahorse or Acid Sea Force. That actually sounds pretty cool. The most obvious change in this mini-map is the underwater section that leads to the vial capsule, but the mini-map, or the min-map, layout by the special light capsule was changed as well. The earlier mini-map is technically more accurate, but it makes it seem like the underwater section at the section immediately after one continuous area. I can't read. Anyways, let's keep going. I guess the purple areas represents where Vial is, most likely. Alright, there is an extra slat in the August prototype ladder that appears in front of X and 0 in the prototype. Here's what that looks like. The reason why those slats were removed is related to how the sewage graphics are handled in each version. In the August build, the sewage is solid and will completely block out X and other objects. In the final version, sewage is a new semi-transparent effect that only partially blocks out objects. Here's what that looks like. I guess so you can keep a little better track of X while you're using him. The see-through effect does look a little bit better in my opinion too. Alright, the first pit in the underwater section leads to a vial capsule in the August prototype. In the final version, that drop was removed. They should have kept it, but whatever. It makes things seem a little more interesting. And it's just a bottomless pit. Having vial capsules every other stage makes more sense than having just 3 of them. Maybe they thought this location was too obscure. There are plenty of Mega Man games that do stuff like that. Heck, Dive Man Stage in Mega Man 4 does something like that with a wire upgrade. Where it looks like it's in a bottomless pit, but then you go down there, and hey, look at that, it's not a bottomless pit. The only thing is, I guess the reason why they removed it is because there's no indication that that's possibly down here. You're kind of just taking a leap of faith at that point. But at the same time, you have the wall clinging ability, so you can kind of just slide down here and you don't have to worry about dying, so it's not that bad. Always closer look at it. Here's how that area looks when Vile Capsule isn't present in the level. Alright? And then when you probably hit a certain layer over here, the game will register you as dead because you fell down the bottomless pit. The layout of the light capsule with the leg enhancement chips was changed for the final version. This doesn't seem to have been done to fix a glitch. Rather, it seems like they changed it so the player can mess around with their new double dashing abilities if they decide to pick up the chip. Nice little teaching element for the player so they can learn how to use their new ability. Nothing wrong with that. There is no Haterika, whatever that says, sub-boss in either of the August prototypes. That sub-boss hasn't been coded or even drawn yet at this point, with the object in that slot 42 being a leftover Mega Man X2 object, and the graphics data with this code here in the August 23rd build, and this code in the final version, being a 32-byte placeholder. And here's what that looks like. Alright, here's an extra head gunner below the first Caterkiller in the early layout. Caterkiller, really? Or Caterkiller? I was thinking of the Caterkillers from the older Sonic games. Very similar names. But anyways, here's what those look like. Alright, next up, Volt Catfish or Electro Namazoros. Alright, besides the usual mini-map differences, there are no changes in light or level graphics at the stages between builds, and here's what that looks like. But a little bit the icons are different. Now look at they have a little table of contents down here too. Neat detail. And those are the purple ones are the Vile Capsules. And that was it for Volt Catfish's stage. This stage always seemed like a bit of a nothing burger anyways. Crushed Crawfish and Scissor / Scissor Shrimper. Standard mini-map icon changes. Closer look. Alright, the water in the background was rearranged in the final version. Now that the water in the August prototype has no power cycling. What I've noticed the difference in between these two pictures, specifically over here, you can see there's not really many water effects over here, but then in the final version they've added some water effects too. But here's a closer look at it. The clouds are also a little less lumpy, apparently, too. Now, it's kind of hard to see the difference of that with these two graphics side by side. I mean, if you notice the difference, that's great. I just have a hard time noticing it myself. The large clouds in the background are less lumpy in the final version. Check the top part of the leftmost cloud closely. Yeah, I still don't really notice that much of a difference, but here's a closer look. Maybe I'm just not observant enough, I don't know. The graphics of the submarine blown hatch is slightly different in the August sample. It's slightly closer together, you can see with the cracks at the top there. Well, they're a little more spread out in this version. Right? The walls in the submarine area are darker in the prototype. In the August prototype, excuse me. Alright, here's what that looks like. And here's the final version. Excuse me, need to sneeze. The underwater background is dark blue in the earlier builds and a brighter green blue color in the final version. Here's what that looks like. It's once again possible to reach Dr. Light's capsule while in right armor. Bad idea. Here's the August build, the August 9th build, and the final game. There are two wall cancers here in the August 9th layout. Since the wall cancer on the right is pretty much harmless, it can only attack fire up and down. It was replaced by a wall blast or walk blaster. The walk blaster in the room below was removed. And here's a closer look at that. Yeah, I can see why they removed that. That doesn't seem like it would be much of a threat in that placement. Because, like, with how it shoots, X could very easily dodge it. You gotta think about your enemy placements too when you make platforming games like this. Some enemies in the X series or in the Classic series do have pretty decent placements, others not so much. But I could probably bring stuff like that up in later playthroughs. Alright, the camera by the ride armor platform isn't locked at the bottom yet. This usually isn't a problem, but the charged Triad Thunder scrolls the camera down a bit, revealing where the foreground cuts off. Here's a closer look. And the player is very much not supposed to see that. Both of the August prototypes has a different Hama scene. X/0 goes further into the bridge before stopping. While the Hama falls down, the player maintains full control of X and Zero and starts falling with it. In the final version, X and Zero will stop before the area where the bridge is destroyed, and the player's controls are locked until the Hama finally lands on the solid ground below. And here's a closer look at that. And this was likely done just to prevent any possible glitches or exploits. Alright, when the machine near the end of the stage is destroyed, the screen is tinted bright green for a single frame in both August prototypes. This is not clear what causes this. Probably a little coloring glitch. And hopefully that was fixed in the final game, which it sounds like it was. Alright, Tunnel Rhino or Screw Massader. There's an extra square at the start of the earlier minimap. That section is 4 squares long in both the prototype and the final version, but it's not clear if this is just a mistake that was corrected or if the August minimap is from an even earlier stage design. Alright, here we go. Here's what it looks like. The entire stage's tile set changed massively between the August simples and the final version. It affected more than just the backgrounds, but it's easier to just compare those from this section. The earlier stage design uses only 2 backgrounds, one of the exterior parts of the level and one for the interior. The final version discards the blue background with a light filtering of a brown background with an animated waterfall, and here's what that looks like. And here's the final version, which actually definitely has much more detail in it. I kind of like this a bit more. Looks even murkier, too. Though this one looks a bit more radioactive. The final game does use a variant of prototype backgrounds for the heart tank room, though it's simplified a bit to fit in VRAM. No more beams of light. And here's what that looks like. The August prototype has a detail that the final version lacks an inactive version of sand shooting machinery that appears later in the stage. It's likely those tiles had to be removed when the tile set was redone. The rock on the foreground and different between versions, which is common in the stage. In general, the earlier design has fewer rocks in the wall. The first fence also goes past the left side of the screen in the August build, which supports the earlier layout theory posted previously. Here's what that looks like. The basic layout is the same, save for the ledge jutting out of the left wall in the tunnel leading out of the section, though the foreground decorations are vastly different. There are more pipes in the earlier stage and fewer of those yellow crystals. There's also an opening in the foreground of the lower part of the section that had to be covered up when the background was redone in the final version. Here's what that looks like. Alright, every conveyor belt except for the first is longer in the final version. Other than that, the changes are similar to the ones seen in the previous area. Starting from the bid/bite room, The August prototypes have a different, more mechanical appearance. While the final version is about the same as the previous room, there are no openings in the foreground. These were likely added after the new background was finished. The same foreground changes are apparent here. The spike pit before the hanging boulder is 8 pixels wider in the final game. This was likely done to fix a bug where X can wind up partially embedded in the boulder if he uses the charged up Triad Thunder on the left edge of the platform. All the player has to do is jump or walk right to get it out, so it's pretty harmless. But it's best that it was fixed, because you don't know, something weird could happen if it wasn't fixed. But here's a closer look. The earlier layout is missing the rock above the platform and the light capsule area. Here's what that looks like. The Hell Crusher boss room has the standard changes, but notice that the final version's room is very similar to the August prototype's bit and byte room in structure. The boulders that the Hell Crusher breaks through aren't in yet, but the explosions they make are already present, and here's what that looks like. More of the same background changes. Here's what that looks like. Just that the background's a little different. I think I kind of prefer the red over the yellow that we have here in the final game. I guess they kept it as red or they kept it as yellow over here because it makes it look more like you're actually underground. Alright, an extra 256 by 256 blocks was added to the left of the long ladder to fix an oversight. If the player dashes just under the ceiling, they can briefly see a blank area with an empty lavender background. Here's what that looks like. Right up here, most likely. And a little down here, too. It's more than lavender, I'd argue, but whatever. The two platforms below the final ladder in the earlier layout was compressed into one taller step in the final version. In the August prototype, the exterior background scene at the start of the stage is used in the uppermost part, while the final version uses the standard cave background. Here's what that looks like. And the skybox would have likely been put up here as well to fill in that white void. Same in this little section over here. Alright, same old foreground changes. You have eyes, you can see them. Oh, excuse me, dude. But yes, we can see them. Alright, in the August 9th build, the sand generators will only spew sand a single time after they come on screen. In the August 9th build, the background music will stop playing after the Hellcrusher fight and won't resume until the player dies or faces Total Rhino. Similarly, the background will stop animating after defeating Hellcrusher again. This is fixed if the player dies and continues the stage. In the August 9th build, the boss fight room lacks any backgrounds or foreground graphics. Alright, next up, Neon Tiger or Shining to Greed, or to Gird. Alright, minimap, standard icon changes, no other up changes. That's it. Closer look at that. The flashing lights seen in the latter part of the stage use a more complicated palette cycling pattern in the final game. Here's what that looks like. Alright, the jungle background has a few more unique tiles than the final version, including the small purple lights found on each of the larger trees. Small purple lights? These things? I don't think those are light. Oh, wait. I guess they are lights in closer look. They're more blue, I'd argue, but whatever. Makes it look more neon, you know? They probably should have kept those in, but oh well. I do like the sunset in the background, though. Can't get mad at that. A couple of insignificant tiles were trimmed from the background, or the underground background. compare the outermost brambles to see the barely noticeable differences. Yeah, not that noticeable. One of the leaf tiles near the upper right wall is missing in both prototypes. Yep, several of the lower leaves in the upper half received a few extra pixels as well. Here's what that looks like. There are more mess, fences, tiles, and less foliage in the earlier layouts. The torn tiles in the August build have the same dark green background color as the ones seen at the start of the stage, which clashes with the teal wall tiles seen here. The final version fixes this by adding some teal-backed thorn graphics in the stage's tile set. These new tiles take the place of the prototype additional background tiles, and here's what that looks like. From here, the theme of the stage changes. The August version uses the jungle backgrounds and have openings in the foregrounds, while the final version switches to an interior theme and is completely closed. And here's what that looks like. Same as above, the August prototypes are still using the jungle backgrounds for the Worm Seeker R boss fight, while the final game uses a cave background, which, given the sub-boss's nature, makes more sense. Now that the room design from the Worm Seeker R room and the Neon Tiger room swapped between versions. Here's a closer look at that. After the Worm Seeker R fight, the layouts and level theming is the same until after the Bit and Bite fight. From here on, the prototypes switch to underground backgrounds with a more industrial, closed-in foreground. The final game keeps the more natural and open jungle theming. Here's what that looks like. Alright, same as above, the final game doesn't have a ceiling in the section. Here's what this looks like. And in the August 9th build, it's possible to get to the hard tank in the upper right corner of this room by dash jumping off of the wall above the shutter and climbing up the wall to the left. Later versions make this method impossible by extending that wall further up and to the left, and here's what that looks like. See, swapped. Since Neon Tiger is supposed to be a solar-powered poacher hunting robot, at least according to the Rockman X3 sourcebook, it doesn't really make sense for his lair to be underground. Yeah, okay, I understand. Do you like that they changed it from the underground theme to the more jungle-ish theme with the big-ass tree in the background? Alright, Miss Delaney. So in all versions, hitting the Tom Bort's enemies with the spinning blades clips their wings, sending them crashing down. In the August prototypes, they sometimes stay on the ground for a few seconds, during which they're still solid and X can still stand on them before exploding. In the final game, they explode immediately after hitting the ground. In the August sample, Neon Tiger's Ray Splasher fires off every 12 frames. In the final game, it was decreased to every 24 frames. Alright, here's what that looks like. So I guess the Ray Splasher's weapon was originally going to be much faster. Our Neon Tiger's dive attack is different in the earlier prototypes. He just dives down and doesn't slash at X like he does in the final version. Alright, and here's what this little animation looks like. So, with that being said, we are now done with the 8 Mavericks, and in part 2, we will look at Vilebit and Dr. Doppler as well as sprite changes, or excuse me, Dr. Doppler. So if y'all enjoy this, you learned something new, and you want to see more, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And considering it's the question today of all the unused content we went over so far, what would have you liked to see in the final game? I guess some of the background differences that were changed I would have liked to see in the final game instead, but that's just me. Let us know. Anyways, thank y'all for watching, see you in part 2, and have a perfect day.